Hi, folks. Welcome back to the only show where we don't need therapy to survive Democrat leadership, just popcorn. You ever notice how Democrats can't tell the difference between struggle and storytelling? Case in point, AOC just debuted a new accent mid-meltdown while screeching about how Democrats are actually sane. Sure, Jan. If Democrats are sane, then the former press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, isn't going around retreating to her identity to avoid accountability.
Do you have any regrets at all for anything that you said while you were speaking on behalf of this administration? It's a simple yes or no. You don't even know.
No, because you're asking for a yes or no question. I want to put some context to it, too. I woke up every day. I woke up every day very proud to be the White House press secretary. I woke up every day as a Black woman who is queer, no one had ever seen someone like me at that podium standing behind that lectern. It was an honor and a privilege to have that job. And I did it to the best of my abilities.
Who cares what your identity is, dude? Just get the job right. Are we really supposed to believe that because Karine Jean-Pierre is a Black and queer woman, she was more qualified to be White House press secretary? Because if her identity is what qualified her, then what? Are we also supposed to believe her identity is what made her one of the most shameless liars in the history of the job? This woman spent years gaslighting the entire nation and the world about Joe Biden's obvious mental decline and still has the nerve to frame her tenure as a civil rights milestone. The only historic part of her time at the podium was how confidently she dodged reality while hiding behind buzzwords about diversity and representation. And that's the problem with this entire identity cult. It's not about merit. It's about moral immunity. We were supposed to live by Martin Luther King Jr.'s vision, right, of a colorblind, character-based society. Instead, Democrats have turned identity into both a shield and a sword, used to deflect criticism, silence dissent, and consolidate power under the guise of compassion. It's not about serving Americans. It's about serving themselves and their chosen tribes. The Democrat Party has built an entire political machine on division, convincing people that victimhood equals virtue and that questioning them is oppression. That's not progress, folks. It's regression dressed up in diversity language. And until we break free from that ideological hostage situation, America will keep rewarding the Karine Jean-Pierres of the world, not for competence, but for compliance. And speaking of DEI hires, Kamala Harris will just not go away.
When are they going to see a woman in charge in the White House?
In their lifetime, for sure.
Could it be you? Possibly. Have you made a decision yet?
No, I have not.
But you say in your book, I'm not done.
That is correct. I am not done.
You know what? Instinctually, I want to tell Kamala Harris to just go away. But deep down, I actually hope she runs. Please, Kamala, do it. Throw your hat in the ring again. We are begging you, because nothing would expose the rot inside the modern Democrat Party faster than another Kamala Harris presidential campaign. This woman is universally disliked, even by her own base. Her approval ratings have hovered underwater for years, making her one of the least popular vice presidents in modern history. And yet she's convinced the country owes her the presidency for some reason, simply because she checks the right identity boxes. That's the sickness of this Democrat identity machine. It rewards narrative over results, optics over competence. And watching Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom, two political sociopaths who exist purely for power and performance, duke it out for control of this collapsing party would be truly poetic. The same party that's now elevating radical ideologues and Marxist communists like Zohran Mamdani is the one pretending Kamala's incoherence and unlikability are somehow historic. What we're witnessing here, in fact, is the full implosion of this movement that replaced ideas with identities, leadership with PR, and principle with performance art. So yes, Kamala, please, we're begging you, run. America needs to see once and for all what happens when symbolism runs completely out of substance. And speaking of complete lack of substance, renowned sociopath and tequila enjoyer Zohran Mamdani is out here laying out his final pitch as to why he should be elected mayor of New York City ahead of the elections later this week. And let's just say that it's cringe.
I get messages that say the only good Muslim is a dead Muslim. I get threats on my life. On the people that I love. And I try not to talk about it. Because the function of racism, as Toni Morrison said, is distraction. My focus has always been on making this a city that's affordable, on making this a city that every New Yorker sees themselves in. And it takes a toll. Because this is a city that every single person deserves to be in. It's a city that we all belong to. And the thing that's made me proudest in this campaign.
Is it a job requirement for Democrats to be sociopaths at this point? Because I cannot be the only one watching Zohran Mamdani desperately try to imitate human emotion, squeezing out fake tears like a fifth-grade actor auditioning for a PSA. It's pure political theater, manufactured empathy designed to frame himself as a victim while dodging accountability for the radical ideology he so clearly pushes. And let's be clear, no one condones threats of violence, but if you exist online, if you're a public figure at all, you'll get hate messages. It's not because Mamdani is Muslim, it's because that's the unfortunate cost of visibility in a hyper-polarized digital world that the Democrats helped create. I mean, I get them. Journalists get them. Influencers get them all the time. It's not oppression. It's just the internet, and it's a fact of public life. But Democrats like Mamdani weaponize that inevitability, turning it into a moral shield that excuses their own extremism. Meanwhile, it's his side of the aisle that has repeatedly normalized dehumanizing language and outright violence against political opponents. So maybe take a lesson here, Mamdani. When you spend years calling your fellow Americans fascists, Nazis, and enemies of democracy, don't be surprised when the culture you helped inflame turns viciously against you. This is what happens when a movement trades reason for resentment. It creates politicians who confuse performance with principle and victimhood with virtue.
Should billionaires exist?
No.
All right, just check. We're just checking. You've been talking to a lot of people. We're just checking in.
I mean, sorry, continue, please. Okay.
Wait, so is this the same Zohran Mamdani who was just crying about getting death threats a minute ago, now casually calling for the elimination of billionaires? That's not economic policy, by the way. That's moralized vengeance dressed up as virtue. When he says billionaires shouldn't exist, what does that actually mean? Because you can't legally tax people out of existence. That's theft. And it would violate the very constitutional framework that protects property rights and free enterprise in this country. And as a New York City mayor, he doesn't even have the authority to raise state-level taxes to that point. So what exactly is he proposing? The reality is he doesn't care how it works. It's about rhetoric, emotional, envy-driven rhetoric that feeds resentment among disillusioned voters who've been conditioned to believe that success itself is immoral. And that's a danger here, folks. When leaders normalize the idea that certain groups shouldn't exist, even rhetorically, they radicalize people who actually take that language literally and seriously. This is how ideological violence gets seeded, through soft authoritarianism disguised as compassion. Democrats have built this moral hierarchy where wealth equals evil, victimhood equals righteousness, and destruction masquerades as some form of justice. So Mamdani's answer isn't actually even a policy statement. It's just a confession of a movement that no longer builds or aspires to build anything or be anything. It only seeks to punish those who seek something higher.
I think the major threat is Donald Trump. And I think that in a fiscal sense, he wakes up every morning, he makes a different threat. One of those threats is to withhold funding from the city. He's already done it a number of times under Adams. He looked to withhold about $18 billion in infrastructure grants, in large part in an attempt of political retribution for the shutdown. And the city has about 8-9% of its budget from federal funding, which all things considered is actually much less than, for example, the state. A lot of our money actually comes through the state. Donald Trump looking to withhold funding is a massive factor. The other part is his attempt to fulfill his promise of creating the single largest deportation force in American history. We have to approach this job with the expectation that crisis will be a regular part of life in dealing with Donald Trump, and that we simultaneously have to move the ball forward on medium and long-term initiatives. It cannot be that every hour of every day is just spent in a defensive posture to Donald Trump, because part of the reason we got Donald Trump is that we didn't have an affirmative vision of what life would look like beyond Donald Trump. And so for me to defeat him in this battle will also require to fulfill the agenda of what a more affordable New York can look like.
I don't think most Americans disagree with anything Mamdani just described Trump is doing. In fact, they'd probably say, good. Stop giving New York City money. Stop funding this welfare state that thrives on Democrat mismanagement and then comes crawling to Washington for a bailout every time the consequences hit. Why should federal taxpayers, people in states that actually balance their budgets like Florida, Tennessee, Texas, keep paying for the dysfunction of cities that refuse to govern responsibly? If Trump withholds billions from these failed states and systems, that's not tyranny, that's just accountability. And yes, the idea of creating the largest deportation task force in American history, that's good. It's not radical to enforce federal law. It's radical that we've stopped doing it. For decades, Democrats have built a coalition that depends on open borders, cheap illegal labor, and the illusion of compassion, all while American workers get undercut and urban chaos spirals out of control. Mamdani's panic here isn't even about policy. It's just purely about power. The Democrat machine depends on federal money and imported dependency to sustain itself. When that pipeline gets cut off, the moral theater completely collapses. And we start to see what's exactly underneath it. A political class that can't survive without the very dysfunction it claims it has the will to fix.
Cuomo laugh and agree when a radio show host said that I would cheer another 9/11. When I listened to the current mayor of this city explaining his decision to endorse Andrew Cuomo as a decision to ensure that New York City does not become Europe, that we do not leave it to violent extremists who burn churches in Nigeria. When I listen to all of this and then turn on TV and see ads that have the words of terrorism and jihad on top of my face that not only mock the way that I eat, but are all intended to terrify New Yorkers as to the prospect of having a Muslim mayor, I decided that it was simply too much. It was too much to think of these as the acts of desperate men looking to salvage the little power that they still had. It was, in fact, a reflection of Islamophobia within our political system that has become so endemic that when we hear it, we do not know from which party it comes. We just know that it is a fact of life in our city's politics. And amidst all of this, the focus of so many is just how much bigotry they can engage in.
It's not surprising at all that in his closing pitch, Zohran Mamdani retreats back into identity politics, painting himself as the eternal victim to tug at the heartstrings of the white liberal women who keep falling for this sort of act. And make no mistake, that is his base. Wealthy, guilt-ridden, white, progressive women who think electing a radical socialist Islamist is some kind of moral cleansing ritual. What they're really doing is suicide bombing New York City politically, voting for the man who will finish what decades of Democrat mismanagement started. And when the city finally collapses under crime, debt, and ideological chaos, they'll be the first ones to move to Florida and complain about the fascists who cleaned up the city. But here's the truth. If Mamdani wants people to believe he doesn't sympathize with extremism, he could start by just disavowing it loudly. Don't take photos with co-conspirators of the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. Don't hang out with people like Hamas Piker, who literally said America deserved 9/11. And don't hide behind Islamophobia every time you're questioned about it. Mamdani is not a victim. He's a Ugandan-born Ivy League product whose mother worked for Disney and whose father teaches at Columbia. America has given him everything: safety, education, wealth, and now a platform to smear the country that made his success possible. His victimhood isn't even real. It's a political weapon, a shield to deflect scrutiny and silence criticism. And that's a larger sickness on the Democrat side, a movement that rewards grievance over gratitude, identity over integrity, and self-pity over service. And since we're on the Zohran Mamdani retard hour, might as well stop by his final rally where he was joined by people like New York Governor Kathy Hochul, as well as AOC, who made a terrific point why she is absolutely brain dead.
But we must remember, in a time such as this, we are not the crazy ones, New York City. We are not the outlandish ones, New York City. They want us to think we are crazy. We are sane.
You know, telling yourself that you're sane while you're pushing childhood gender transitions, climate apocalypse hysteria, and race-based everything is exactly the kind of thing insane people do. It's pathological at this point. These people are so deep in their own delusion that they have to keep chanting, "We are sane! We are sane! We are sane!" just so they can start believing it. And that's what's really going on here. A movement that's completely lost its grip on reality, but still demands moral authority over everyone else. Any person with even a modicum of common sense can see through this nonsense. But those still hypnotized by this narrative, by the endless fear-mongering about the climate, by the identity cult, by the manufactured moral panic, genuinely feel sorry for you because you're not living in truth anymore. You're living in a political psychosis engineered by the Democrat Party and people like AOC who mistake emotional performance for moral clarity. This is what happens when politics becomes therapy, folks. You get mobs of people crying, "We're not crazy, believe us," while burning down the institutions that kept society stable for centuries. It's not sanity, it's just mass delusion with good branding at this point.
Jews escaping Holocaust, Black Americans fleeing slavery and Jim Crow, Latinos seeking a better life, Native people standing for themselves, Asian Americans coming together in Queens, in Brooklyn, in the Bronx, in Manhattan, in Staten Island, in this country.
You know the rally's getting real good when Democrats go full shrill. By the way, does anybody actually watch that and feel inspired in any sort of way? Because AOC's not delivering a message. She's just listing identity groups like she's checking boxes on a diversity spreadsheet, switching accents mid-sentence as if it makes her sound more authentic. Why does she say Latino with an exaggerated accent? You're American, dude. Just say the word. I actually grew up in Latin America, and even I don't talk like that. It's just desperate pandering, pure and simple, and it appeals to no one outside of her own echo chamber. But this is the modern Democrat Party. Identity before ideas. They don't want Americans uniting around shared values. They want every group to see itself as a separate grievance coalition that needs rescuing by the state. It's divide and conquer, wrapped in faux empathy. AOC isn't talking about America's shared history of resilience. She's weaponizing historical pain to maintain her political power. And that's why this kind of rhetoric feels so hollow, because it's not about liberation. It's purely about Democrat control. America is at a crossroads, folks. And I know we've been here before. This isn't the first and it won't be the last. The country will survive, but survival alone isn't victory. We need action. We need Americans to reconnect with what that word actually means: independence, resilience, and the courage to say no when the system tells you to comply. We can't let a loud, small, and politically obsessed minority dictate the lives of the majority. That's exactly what's happening right now in New York with people like Zohran Mamdani and his supporters. A handful of ideologues are steering policy for millions of working families who are too busy building businesses, raising kids, and chasing the American dream to notice what's happening around them. And that's the danger, because Democrats are counting on your distraction. They've built an empire on dependency, and they want it to reach everyone, including you. They don't want self-reliant citizens. They want managed subjects, people too indebted to the system to question it. So ask yourself, how much longer can a free country survive when freedom itself becomes inconvenient to those in power? At what point do comfort and apathy turn into quiet surrender? Because whether you realize it or not, every time you look away, someone else is making decisions about your money, your future, and your children's lives. You tell me what you think in the comments down below. Hope you have a terrific day. Peace.